Federal election 2025 is closing in on us soon, and at this point, the Liberals continue to lead in the polls. Joining us from Calgary to chat about the election is Brian Rushfeldt, former president of Canada Family Action. He spent many years lobbying members of Parliament for common sense family values. So good to have you with us, Brian.
Be with you, and especially at a critical time that we're in Canada.
Yeah, this is a big thing. This election has a lot of implications, depending on which way it goes. So, I was going to start with this, Brian. Political parties often use fear to attract votes, right? I mean, that's pretty common. A very interesting post-media Leger poll was released showing that 6 in 10 Liberal voters say they were motivated primarily by a fear of what the future holds for Canada. Now, this compared to 75% of Conservative voters who say their motivation was primarily a hope for a better future in Canada to live, work, and raise a family. So you've basically got fear on the one side and hope on the other side. Just an interesting dynamic. Yeah.
Well, I think part of that would come down from the perspective of those two parties, and part of it from the perspective of what we've seen over the last 9 years of government is things falling apart, and that probably provokes fear amongst the Liberals. On the other hand, I think the Conservatives have seen that, but they're also saying there's a better way. We can do better than that. We are a great nation. We can do better. So I can see why they have hope that, hey, we've got a future if we handle it right.
Yeah, I mean, fear versus hope. Man, I think a lot of the fear comes, of course, from the uncertainty with the, tariff threats and so forth. Uncertainty always tends to bring some anxiety and fear, right? So, maybe that settles out some. Who knows? Maybe things will switch a bit. I'm not sure, but I mean, we all need some hope here for sure, right? I mean, Canada needs that. We need to stop beating ourselves up. Say, we're as Canadians, we're just bad people. No, we're not. We're good people. We have a rich history, and we have a good future. So,
well, we've got a rich history, and we've got a rich country. There's so many things about our country that make us a great country if we use it right.
Yeah, well, we have a huge natural resources sector, and that's, of course, one of the issues we need to talk about here, the carbon tax issue. We know that Carney, of course, cut back the consumer carbon tax that the Liberals themselves, mind you, championed for years. And he says he does plan to keep the industrial tax in place, though, saying, well, the heavy emitters are going to be doing the paying, all right, and you and I, the consumers, are going to be off the hook here. Well, another poll, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, it's another Leger poll, but showing 70%, wow, I thought, you got to be kidding, 70% of Canadians believe businesses pass on most or some of the cost of the industrial carbon tax to consumers, to us, but only 9% believe that businesses pay most of the cost, so 21% undecided. Now this could potentially, I guess it could potentially backfire on the Liberals?
I think it can. I think people will come to realize, and the simple example is if I'm running a business and the government taxes me an extra 10% for whatever purpose, as a business, I have to recoup that. So who am I going to recoup it from? I'm going to recoup it from you because the price is going to go up. It's simple economics, simple business practice. And I think Canadians are waking up to that slowly. But of course, the Liberal spin has been, oh, well, we'll just put it on those top level people and they will be the ones that pay. Not going to happen.
Well, I mean, you think about it, I guess, even, if natural gas is used to produce electricity, there'll be a charge to those providers, right, from the government. Fertilizers or our farmers, if they have to pay more, then your groceries go up, right? Your electricity bill goes up, whatever it is. I mean, so it does, I think, trickle down for sure. Yeah, pipelines, of course, tied in with this. And again, very interesting to see that public opinion has changed on this. A sizable majority of Canadians saying we do need a coast-to-coast pipeline. So Carney just coming out saying pipelines are not necessarily among major projects to prioritize. He's saying maybe. So no commitment to that. Now, Polyev, on the flip side, is committed to build pipelines. You know, yet obviously at this point, when you look at the polls, this seems to be working for Carney. So, yeah, I mean, you know, maybe he's just going to keep doing what he's doing then. Your thoughts there?
Well, I think Carney's catering somewhat to Quebec because Quebec said they're never going to allow a pipeline to run through their province. It's easy to go around their province in that southern area, but that's another point. But I think Canadians overall are starting to see that this whole green energy thing has been a scam. It's not working. It's an honorable thing to look to, but we still need oil. We still need gas, and and the only way we're going to have that and have it functioning properly is for with pipelines. And of course, we've got a great product to export. And we can't export it by hauling it on trains and trucks. So I think people will hopefully wake up in the next 2 weeks to the fact that pipelines are not super dangerous, but they are necessary for a good economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you know, will the economy come to the top in this election as being the primary issue or not? I guess we'll find out. Crime and public safety certainly being brought up lately by the Conservatives in particular, but I think all the parties have now responded to that. It's a concern, of course, for many Canadians, in particularly in the larger centres like Toronto and Vancouver and so forth. People tired of the catch and release system, I think. I mean, I don't care what political stripe you're from, when you look and you see that, you go, yeah, you know, the guy should have been in jail, and, you know, somebody's suffering as a result now. So Pierre Poilievre taking some heat for his proposal to pass a law to allow judges to impose consecutive life sentences in cases of multiple mass murderers, right? Essentially, his quote, I think, is something like, you know, jailed mass murderers should only come out in a box, right? So, I mean, so some people are going to, react negatively to that, but I think a lot of people going, yeah, I understand the sentiment there, right? So he's also saying he would use the notwithstanding clause to make it happen, and that's, of course, getting a lot of hackles up, rightly or wrongly. Yeah, what do you think of that?
Well, I think we're at a point where we have to take action. We've been depending on the courts or judges, if you will, to make reasonable decisions, and they're not. They're simply not making them. If we need a law, which is passed by Canadian Parliament, not judges, if the law says this is what you have to do, then the judges are going to have to follow that. And I think we're at a point, unfortunately, we can't depend on the courts and the judges anymore because they do. They catch, they release criminals back out on the street the next day committing crime. That's for all of our sake, that has to be handled. And if it needs the notwithstanding clause to do it and overriding judges, let's do it because Canadian safety is number one.
Yeah, when it comes down to when you look at your family, if they're being threatened, you know what, we want to step in and do something about it, right? We get tired of nothing changing. Now, he's also proposing a 3-strike law, so any, 3 serious convictions, I guess, there'd be a minimum 10-year minimum sentence, I think, right? That's got to be at least 10 years and possibly even higher, but, and again, some pushback against that as well, saying, well, it's got to be each judge, free to assess it on a case-by-case basis. So I get that in one sense. On the other hand, I think people get tired of so many judges seeming to side with the victim with the perpetrator rather than with the victim.
Well, and we saw this 15 years ago. I worked with the Conservative government and Prime Minister Harper to get a mandatory minimum sentence for child sex offenders. We saw sex offenders, sometimes 10 victims. One guy in Eastern Canada, 200 victims, 200 children that he'd abused. We finally got a 1-year mandatory, which is a pathetic mandatory, but at least we got 1 year. The Liberals came in and they killed the mandatory sentences. They said that takes away the ability of judges to decide on cases. Well, the judges don't make the law. We as citizens elect people to make the law, and the judges are required by my standard to obey those laws. So if we need to put some strict laws in place, let's do it.
Okay, I tend to lean that way as well, and I do understand idea of a case by case thing. There are, things, some unique cases for sure. But again, there's just been such a trend toward, judges making decisions. I think that the majority of Canadians would scratch their heads and say, is that really
Yes,
just,
they're
right?
asking questions. Yes,
Yeah,
finally asking questions.
yeah, for sure. Government accountability, always an issue in any election. Mark Carney, under all kinds of pressure to reveal his assets to Canadians, hasn't done so yet, which is, to me, actually kind of curious. Of course, it raises some red flags, and we wonder, well, why haven't you revealed that? I mean, that's the bottom line there, I think, for many people is, okay, what's up with this, right? One of Poilievre's recent announcements is to tighten financial transparency rules for elected officials, so accountability. And on the other hand, he's also getting criticized for not actually going far enough with those proposed legislation, for accountability. How accountable do we need to be?
Well, I think the accountability for me, having watched for a number of years what's going on, doesn't just relate back to where did Carney make his money, who's he involved with. We have seen so many violations, ethics violations of ethics, which is a violation of the law. We saw Trudeau probably, I think, face about 5 or 6 ethics violations, um, and very little accountability. In fact, some of those things, nothing was done, absolutely nothing. And so to me, it goes way beyond what the MP or the prime minister is doing in his own with his own money in his own company. It goes to the fact, let's have transparency and let's take some action when violations of ethics, as they call it in government, happen. And so clearly we need our system is broken in that area and it needs fixed.
Yeah, there needs to be some consequences. People get tired of seeing politicians getting away with stuff that no one else would get away with, right? So, all right, one law for me, one for thee, right? Now, before calling the election, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had proposed some changes to the Income Tax Act to, I think it was an all-parties finance committee, but all the parties, well, I think except for the Conservatives on this one, but to remove charitable tax status from pro-life pregnancy crisis centers as well as religious charities. So which would include churches of any faith background. Question is, so will Mark Carney's Liberals follow through on that? At this point, I don't think he's said one way or the other, but that is a concern, of course, for many of us in the faith community.
Well, that whole area has been talked about probably for 15 years now. There's been suggestions, takes the tax status away some churches, they should be paying land tax, etc. Now we've expanded that a little bit to whether I make a donation, whether I can deduct that or not. I think it will happen if the Liberals are elected. The Liberals are looking for every possible way to collect money from us, to suck more dollars in their taxes. So whatever way that they can apply a tax, they're going to apply a tax. Of course, I always ask some of the debaters on this, why do we always have to look for new money to tax people? If we're not meeting our budget, then like I do in my household, I don't go out and get another loan. I reduce my expenditure. We're $1 trillion in debt in this country now because Trudeau and his government for 9 years have funneled money out of here to every crook in the world. And they don't want to reduce the spending. They want to suck more out of us as taxpayers. So I think the Liberals will do whatever they can to try and justify another tax.
Okay. You didn't hold back on that one.
No.
Well, what would you say to Christians watching who may be hesitant to even get involved in this election? It happens every year, it seems. Whenever there's an election, there's a certain percentage of Christians who just don't bother to go and vote. And I get it. As Christians, we do believe that God is the one who brings about change, not government. But it's part of that. It's part of the process, I think. So let's use every opportunity to make a difference?
Well, I think people that have argued that God makes changes, but how does God work? He works through his people.
Yes.
And I've argued for a long time since Canada Family Action days that people, Christians, need to be engaged in the political world, not because it's politics, but because we have to care and look after the rest of people in Canada. That's part of us, our call as a Christian. Be involved, engaged to make society the best it can be. And by doing that, sometimes it requires us to go to a poll and make a decision about who we want elected. Can you imagine if we had 300 honest, godly men and women in Parliament tomorrow? What the Parliament would actually do with a lot of these issues that are causing stress and pain and heartache for Canadians. So yes, I say go and vote. Vote however you wish, but look at who you're voting for. Are they godly men and women? Are they honest? Do they have integrity? If they do, vote for them. Go for
Okay,
it.
no, I appreciate that. Uh, do you have any fearless predictions, Brian, as to the outcome of this election? Who will win? By what margin? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to speak from a hopeful place. I think we're going to see the Conservatives with a majority, maybe 10 to 20 seats majority, because I think people are waking up. There's a shift. See, the polls, I've argued for a long time that the polls are never all that accurate because they poll 1,500 people. Out of those 1,500 people, how many of those people actually vote or even know what politics is? So you're not getting a proper representation. If you were to go to all the voting people to ask, I think the polls would come out differently. And I believe we're going to see a majority of Conservatives across Canada. Not a big majority, but we need a majority.
Well, I encourage our viewers to pray for good results to come out of all of this here. All
Yeah,
right.
pray and vote.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Gotcha. Hey, thanks for being with us today, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.